the interviews by telephone who are in various cities on academic business. We will provide broadcast media with highlights of the video clips for use. We will provide archival photographs. And if anyone wants to linger at the conclusion of this press briefing to do one-on-one interviews with any of the assembled, we welcome you. My name is Larry Winoker. I have been a consultant working with Mark for the last 5 years, struck entirely about this act of conscience that sent Mark into a undercover life from 2001 to present. Mark began this odyssey collecting mementos, memorabilia, artifacts of the Holocaust, so that future generations and future deniers would not be able to be successful in denying what went on in the Second World War. Mark is a very courageous man. He has risked his life. He's infiltrated deeply into the neo-Nazi movement, posing as a sympathizer and deriving incredibly high-placed contacts within the surviving SS and generally the hate community of Europe. We have some distinguished guests with us. I can't mention them all, but let me identify a few people. Mark will be speaking. Following Mark, we will have comments by one of our plaintiffs, Burton Bernstein, whose family was immediately impacted by the execution orders issued by our subject. We have our lawyers, our lead counsel, Nitzana Darshan-Leitner from Tel Aviv, who is prosecuting this case in the civil court, U.S. District Court in the District of Columbia. If you'll note on the press releases, there's an addendum for your editors where you can retrieve the complaint in its entirety and or view archival materials, the actual execution orders, et cetera, so you can review for yourselves. We have some video to show you, and it is very significant, very unprecedented video. The institutions of the world have plenty of testimonials from victims, but they don't have testimonials from perpetrators. This makes this video you're about to see very unique, and let me just explain briefly. The video is shot handheld. The beginning of the video takes place at an SS conclave in the Alps of Austria. It demonstrates that the movement is very much alive, and it demonstrates the fact that these elder people were high-level functionaries during the extermination of the Jewish people in World War II and others. The beginning montage is simply meant to show you the depth of Mark's engagement with these people. You will hear Mark's voice from time to time. It will let you see the comrades who he adopted into his life. Last Thursday, on the first day of Hanukkah, Mark and his film crew went to the subject's home and proceeded to interview him. During the course of the interview, it became very escalated and very contentious. And Mark was even attacked by his resident PhD, a 48-year-old Swede, and had a confrontation. We will show you that video of that last confrontation. So please, what you'll see here first, the prelude is the rally. Secondly is a Q&A with the subject. It is subtitled. If you are print people trying to read the subtitles, you might want to move a little closer to the room. It'll be easier for your viewing. So if we can dim the lights and roll the video, it's about 9 minutes, so I beg your patience. And then we'll get into a more substantive discussion with our lawyers and with our... I want to add one thing for anybody who might note this, any of you print journalists. Stephen Smith, the executive director of the Shoah Foundation, a celebrated academic and Holocaust survivor, is available by telephone. I want to just give out his number in case any of you want to reach out to him. He would have been here, but he's hosting the annual meeting at Shoah at USC this week, unfortunately. Stephen's number is 213-270-3116, and it's Stephen Smith, spelled S-M-I-T-H. And he will be available from 11:30 till 1 o'clock today to speak to any of you. His quote appears in the press release, etc. Okay, so if we can dim the lights and pretty heartbreaking to see that as I look into the eyes of Leo Zisman sitting in the front row here, who spent 3.5 years in concentration camps, losing his sisters, his parents, and only surviving with his brother. The horror of this is palpable. And sir, it breaks my heart for you to see this, but this is for perpetuity. This is to let the world know this happened. There were perpetrators. They looked like grandfathers. They looked like civilized people. But that's what death looks like, and that's what evil looks like. You saw the young generation, and you see the progenitors of that generation. Please welcome Mark Gould.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for coming. I started doing this work shortly after 9/11 over in Germany, and I was following the story of Jerome Nathaniel Shapiro. He was an Orthodox Jew from Brooklyn who, in 1945, on May 7th, arrested Reichsmarshal Hermann Goering. Goering signs the order for the final solution of the Jewish question, which is the Wannsee, a very famous order. So I was pursuing this Shapiro-Goring arrest story and started following along, and I discovered that it was the final days of the war. Adolf Hitler, from his bunker, sends a telegram out, a very urgent telegram, to a Dr. Bernhard Frank. And the order was to arrest Goring. So Frank arrested Goring. And from there, the order was to shoot Goring. So Frank had to order to shoot Goring. He had Goring under arrest and his entire family, and he decided to let him go. Frank lets Goring go. Goring's now on the run, and he is arrested by a Jew from New York named Jerome Nathaniel Shapiro, an American GI lieutenant. Shapiro arrests him and takes a Golden Walker PPK pistol, which Goring surrendered to Shapiro at their interaction. From there, I discovered this gun, was following the story, and by the pursuit of the Goring-Shapiro story, I found Dr. Bernhard Frank. From there, I set up a time to do an interview with him. And 8 days before I had my first interview with him, we received a letter. And the letter was signed a certain way. When we got the letter, we had already developed a lot of material. Before we do any interviews with the subject, the specimen, we'll get as much as we can about the person. And we happen to have key orders out. And what we discovered, to our shock, was that the letter we'd received from him and the killing orders, the July 28, 1941 order, this is the order to commence genocide against the Jews, different order than from what Goring signed, which is the final solution. Before they could come up with a final solution, they needed to do an exploratory kind of program to see if the SS would actually do it. Would the SS shoot Jewish women and children and the elderly? We took the signatures and they matched. By coincidence, we had just put them together. Then from there, 8 days before I was supposed to sit down with him, we knew we had a whole different kind of interview. It wasn't going to be about, it could still be about Hitler and Goring, but also now, would he admit it? Would he admit to his signature on this order? When he admits, and you saw it here, we had him do this several times, when he admits to his signature on that order, that's a very key thing, because no longer is this a Jewish conspiracy to manipulate the world by saying that the Holocaust happened. This is not a Jewish conspiracy. This thing happened. This man admits to his signature on these orders. These orders are real. The after-action reports, he handled the orders, he handled the after-action reports. His desk was ground zero for the Shoah. It all started there. After they would commence the killings, the after-action reports would come back to his desk with his name on them, or addressed to him. He then was in charge of cleansing the record. So in a sense, he is the one who starts it, by signing the order. It's a Himmler order. It's not his order. It's a Himmler order. Chain of command is Hitler, Himmler, and Frank signs off for correctness, for FDR. He primes the order and sends it out, dispatches it into the killing fields to the SS Cavalry and the 1st SS Infantry. He's to cleanse the record because he's an SS doctor. He's a PhD in blood and soil, and he's a linguist. So he handles languages. So hence, for Himmler, he is to cleanse the record so that the history would reflect that they were actually killing innocent people. He does this up until November, and he writes what they call the war diary. And from there, the Nazis, Himmler knew that indeed the SS would. That Hitler could make the command, and it would follow its way down the chain of command into the depths of the Soviet Union. And then the SS would target innocent Jews in shtetls, small town cities, and they would wipe them out. Of course, this research through my family, the Resnicks, I was encouraged to seek out the Bernstein side of the family. And from there, I became acquainted with Burton Bernstein. And we had put things together and had realized that the 1st SS Infantry was in a town called Korets in Ukraine. When the July 28th order came out, Dr. Frank sent that order to the 1st SS Infantry in Korets, same town that the Burton Bernstein's family and my family came from. And so, any questions? Yeah.
How many more Franks are still running around loose?
The question was how many more Franks are running around loose? They're all pretty old by now. I really have no idea, but for this person to be running around, I think I was in the phone book under Dr. Bernhard Frank. He wasn't going to go to Argentina. He was there. He was there for anybody to discover. I mean, if you know the history, and let's say you're an investigator, and your job is to locate Nazi war criminals. I don't know how they missed this guy. I'm from LA. I have a Jewish last name, and I don't speak German, and I found it. It's not that difficult. They're in the phone book. You know, it is. For him, he had kept this secret for so long, he couldn't tell anybody. Didn't he go to his therapist? What did you say? So when I came in, I had the order, I put it in his hand, and he admitted he had signed it. That was epic. For him, it was I had a ticket now. I had a ticket into his world. He had been waiting for somebody to come along to serve because he wanted credit badly for this. Because he knew that in his belief, his ideology, that SS ideology, that it was a great thing. And I don't know how many more there are out there, but I would imagine there's got to be some. Yeah.
When you say he planted the order, what exactly did he do what kind of changes did he make to these documents?
Great question. The question was, when he cleansed the orders, what did he do? When you see the after-action reports come in, they use pretty blunt language. We shot this many Jews. Some of them go explicit. They say we de-Jewified an area. We shot this many kids. We shot this many women. The Germans kept accounting of this. Dr. Frank's job was to sit at his desk, receive these after-action reports coming in addressed to him, and then he was to remove them from what is known as the war diary. It's kind of the official record of Himmler's commando staff. It's a pretty big deal. This is how history would remember them. And his job was just to take the reports and remove anything about the killing of Jews, and only focus on the glory of the bravery of the SS in the field, to record that for the history, and to take out the inconvenient parts, which was mass slaughter of innocent people.
How did you get him to talk? What did you tell him? Who did you tell him you were?
Who did you tell him you were?
Why did he agree to talk to you?
I told him who I was, gave him my name. His concern was if I was a Jew or not. That was he asked what was my nationality, which is code for is this guy a Jew or not. I told him that I was not a Jew. Thank you. I told him that I was not a Jew, and that I was interested in learning about the history of the Reich and the Schutzstaffel of the SS. And put cameras on him, and I was very interested in his story and what he had to say, and that appealed to him. He's a bit of a narcissist, so he liked that camera on him. He fed his ego, and it didn't really take very much. He really wanted to talk to somebody, but nobody had come to him with the right ticket in, which was the orders themselves, and he liked to take credit for that, signing those things.
What was it that started you on this whole journey? What was it about this story that was so compelling for you?
When I found it started with Jerome Shapiro. It really started with my family. I was living with my girlfriend. She wanted to have kids. So I started looking into my dysfunctional family I grew up with. I grew up with a crazy, big Jewish section of my family. It represents the spectrum of society. And before I had kids, I wanted to kind of learn a little bit about how things work. I didn't want to manifest dysfunction within children I had not had yet. So one thing led to another. I started just looking into my family here and there. My grandfather was severely wounded in World War II, south of Rome. I caught 2 German grenades in his back, and he came back. He was pretty messed up. He had been in a lot of combat, and it had a ripple effect across my entire family. I grew up in that kind of environment. My grandfather was the one when I was a kid sat me down with a big Time Life book, big books, black and white pictures. I know you've all seen them, and started flipping through the pages with me, telling me, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, those are the Nazis, and then he showed me places that he was at in Italy, in North Africa. I was fascinated. It just blew my mind. I thought this was really interesting. And so, as I started doing this family archaeology, if you will, and this is like pre-internet, like Ancestry.com, before all that, I run across this story of Jerome Shapiro, and I followed that story. I thought that was interesting. I thought that at the end of World War II, it was a Jew who arrested Herman Goring. But that was just, it wasn't a Catholic, it wasn't a Methodist, it wasn't a Christian, but a Jew. It wasn't staged. This Orthodox Jew from New York, he wrapped himself into felon. He wore Star of David as a samuzah, had an H for Hebrew on his dog tags. And he drove 145 kilometers behind enemy lines in the Alps with 4 other guys, and found Goring and arrested him and brought him back in. I thought that was amazing. I call it a divine apprehension. Like it must have been by God that this happened. And just started pursuing this thing, one thing led to another. It was just like I was supposed to do it. I don't know. It was this kind of gravitational pull to do this thing. And one thing led to another. A series of crazy events, things started to come together.
Hi, I wanted to ask you, you said that Dr. Zeng wanted credit for his actions in the Second World War, but did you show any signs of remorse at all?
No. Not at all. No sense of remorse.
He was still proud of remorse.
He was proud. He said it was necessary. He said that the Jews had done this to themselves. He blamed the Jews. He said that they were engaged in partisan warfare and it was interrupting the supply lines. The German Wehrmacht was on the front and they needed to get the supplies to them, and it was the Jews who were blocking their supplies and interrupting the supply lines. So the Jews needed to die. And I asked him here, Doctor, about the women and children, babies, and he just went. So I asked him again, in the first day of Hanukkah this year, as the sun is going down on the window behind me, he sits in front of a big bay window, and as the sun was going down, I asked him again, how about the women and children? He question he can't answer that, but that's the one part they can't answer. To shoot innocent women and children is inexcusable.
And we saw also in the video that the neo-Nazis that you also infiltrated contact you.
I'm sorry, the neo-Nazis what?
The neo-Nazis that you infiltrated, did they contact you? Did you hear anything back?
No.
Nothing yet?
No.
We have a question.
Any further questions?
Yes.
First of all, it's remarkable that he's still alive, but so much of the Holocaust deniers in the world the fact that you can find Dr. Frank and bring justice and tell the story and the truth. To the younger generation that may never know the real truth. What happens, what does his government do now when this information is finally released? What kind of justice can actually be done as he's still alive?
That's up to Germany what they want to do. I think, I've lived in Germany a while. I was a guest in the country, Austria, Germany. Knowing Germans, they walk around today with the shame of the Shoah, the guilt. Germans, every German will tell you, if they travel somewhere and it comes up, where are you from? And they say, I'm from Germany. The first thing people think of is Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. They know that. And Germans walk around today and they don't know why, younger generations, they don't know why they've been stuck with this guilt of the Shoah, why they pay out huge sums of reparations and tax dollars go to that. This is the source. It starts with him. There's no one before him. This is pre-Eichmann. This is pre-Bonse. This is pre-gas chambers. This is pre-trains. This is the source. When he signs that order and dispatches it into the field, that's when the Nazis become the Nazis. Because before that, they were just a victorious army, like many in history. They had the flags, they had the boots, but they weren't engaged in genocide yet. And he signs that order and dispatches it into the field, and genocide has changed the perception of the Nazis. So globally, when people see a swastika, they see a picture of Hitler, they think of the Jews. It's because of the July 28th order, 1941. And it would be interesting to see how the Germans come to terms with this. And why didn't they find this? It was there to find. What else is there? I don't know. Leo had a good question. What else? Who else? I don't know. But I mean, if you look at, here's another way to look at it. The Einsatzgruppe was very, very efficient. They rolled into a town, they seized all the bank accounts, they seized all the safety deposit boxes. They took the Jews and put them into ghettos. They started to initiate the locals to kill the Jews. They were very, very efficient. Where was the Einsatzgruppe that spirit, if you will, of thoroughness and going through Germany or the world and finding perpetrators of the Shoah? Where was that? I think the absence of that, the polar opposite of the Shoah, actually holding Nazis accountable, didn't really see that. Germany's going through a bit of a rebranding right now in the global community. They want to be seen as getting tough on their Nazis. Really? There he is.
How have they responded? What has happened?
Haven't talked to him.
All these years that you've spent investigating, there is no doubt in your mind who this is and what he did.
I've brought in academics, experts in the field, had them sit down, had them interview, and everyone who's looked at this and knows the history and, from a intellectual point of view, PhD, everybody's agreed that there's been never a doubt as to who he is, and he admits who he is.
And I'm sorry to come in late and intrude in this way, but tell me again the most heinous, what you found this man to be responsible for.
He signed the July 28th order, 1941, the order to commence genocide against the Jews.
And in your mind, he's responsible for how many deaths?
That is, I mean, that's That's another question. And how responsible is he? He signs it for FDR, for Fürstigkeit, to authenticate the order. It's a Himmler order. He signs other orders and he cleanses the record. His responsibility is immense. It's immeasurable in my mind.
We'll continue. You'll have an opportunity to do one-on-ones, but I'd like to invite a couple of individuals to the podium. Burton, will you join? This is Burton Bernstein, one of the Bernstein, I know. You guys have your own unique twist. And Nitzana Darshan-Leitner, who's our counsel from Israel. And Leo Sisman, who is a survivor. And just please, you can direct your questions relative. If you have just a brief opening remark, any of you, please make it. And we'll field questions regarding the lawsuit that's filed.
I'll be very brief. First, I guess I'll introduce myself. I'm a writer.
Can you move the microphone closer?
Okay. Okay.
Yes, don't touch it again.
I'm a writer, professional, now essentially retired. I worked 35 years as staff writer in the New Yorker magazine, and I've written 9 books. One of those books, and which originally was a 2-part piece in the New Yorker in the 1980s, was about my family, the Bernstein family, which a lot of people write memoirs about family, but mine is rather extraordinary in that my brother, who was older, was Leonard Bernstein, who rose to an extraordinary fame against all odds and changed the family completely. So we started out as a very middle-class Boston family, and we ended up as a rather world-famous family. 2 of Leonard's children happen to be here today, Jamie and Alexander, sitting over there. And anyway, in the course, I was actually coaxed by my wonderful editor of the New Yorker, William Shawn, to write a profile as if I weren't really part of the family about this family. And I thought, well, that's hard to do, but I tried to do it. A great part of this family story was about the family members who were left in the Ukraine, in various shtetls and other places, and were the very first pre-death camp victims of such Schweinhund as this Mr. Bernhard Frank, to use his native tongue. And I can think of much other things to call it. And I did quite a bit of research at YIVO in New York and others, and I dug up and had translators various letters from Russia, from the few survivors who survived, and to my father, and I had them translated, and I realized there was an extraordinary story there. I'm not plugging the book. I thought I might read just one short part of it to show you how it affected me. And if you'll bear with me for a minute, I find it here. I'll just read quickly from this. My father had a brother who did manage to escape. His name was Shlomo, and he became a high-ranking official in the communist, the Soviet government. He managed to escape by going to Moscow. And at the end of the war, a letter arrived from Shlomo. He and his family were alive and well in Moscow. Sora Rivka, who was my father's sister, and the Shlomo sister, obviously, as we feared, as we knew, had not been so fortunate. She, her husband, and 3 of her sons were murdered by the Germans about 15 months after the Ukraine invasion. But miracle and miracles, their oldest son, Mikhail, had survived. Through later correspondence and from other sources, my father and I learned more about the miracle. Special SS units, the dreaded Einsatzgruppen, rather than the regular Wehrmacht, had been sent into the heavily Jewish areas of the Ukraine for specific reasons, so that there would not be the slightest hesitation about murdering every Jewish man, woman, and child encountered. No exceptions. The SS performed as it had been expected. On the holiday of Sukkot, 5,000 Jews of Mezarich, including Sora Rivka, my father's sister, her husband, and their 3 younger sons, were herded into a brick factory outside the town and machine gunned by the Nazis. However, Mikhail, the oldest son, had long since fled the area. At the time of the invasion, Mikhail had just been graduated from the Mezarich High School, and defying his parents' wishes, he, with some friends, left home on foot for eastern Russia. And he went on to join the Red Army and fight throughout all World War II, and miraculously survived that. Anyway, this moved me to do more and more research, and thanks to YIVO in New York, I came across something called the Koretz book, which was a list by the few survivors who managed to get to Israel. And it turned out this book that is both in Hebrew and in Yiddish. And there was a long, long list of people and who may or may not have been direct relatives of ours, but they were part of the Malamed family in Koretz. And one of these people, listed in this book, I noticed the dozens of Bernstein names, surnames, and Malamud names, but none of the given names were familiar. It wasn't until I read an entry entitled Family of Kedyat and Ahuva Malamed, Israel, and Abraham Malamed, America. And this Abraham Malamed, America, who changed his name to Miller when he got to America, worked for my father for many years, ever since my father first started, was a rather saintly, kind man. And of course, suddenly that brought it all home to me. And all these people I never knew. And as I said in the book, at the end of this long list, after reading that death roster of people I never knew, not only did I understand the Holocaust, but I understood for the first time really what my family was. Now, having done this, I then got by circuitous route a communication from Mark Gould saying he was interested. He had read this book and was interested in doing writing more about it himself, and indeed had a book contract with Random House to do it. And I thought, well, that's wonderful. But being a reporter myself, I realized you got to have hard facts. There's no way around it. You got to have real hard facts. And as the time went by, Mark sent me hard facts. He sent me copies of directives from Mr. Frank and that had been written and filed, and Mark managed to find them through incredible investigative reporting, and I suppose also good luck, which every reporter needs. And because of that, we struck up a relationship, and the first time I met him face to face was just a couple hours ago here. But we had talked a great deal, and all I can say is he's done an extraordinary thing, and I wish him all the luck in the world, and what he has done will be really lasting forever. And I'm glad that in whatever small way I had a part of it. That's all.
This is Leo Zisman, Z-I-S-M-A-N.
Please, Leo.
Good morning. My name is Leo, L-E-O. At home they call me Label, L-E-A-B-L. Zisman, Z-I-S-M-A-N. I am what you call a survivor. That's not really a good description. I survived the war. I survived the Holocaust. People ask me, why am I talking? Right now, I'm retired. By the way, Joseph, a month ago, I celebrated my family's, maybe a surprise party, an 80th birthday party. So I'm not a youngster. I was 13 and a half years old when they took us from Kovna Ghetto to Germany, stopped off in Stutthof. The women were taken off, because Stutthof was a women's concentration camp. And I went with the men. I wanted to go with my mother. It's, by the way, I finished my book. It's actually a family for the family, but right now people tell me it may be good as a textbook to tell how a little boy, a Jewish boy, survived the war. And from there I ended up in Dachau. In Dachau they didn't kill us. We were too young to work. So they rounded up about 131 children, and from there they shipped us straight to Auschwitz, Birkenau. You know, Auschwitz and Birkenau are two different things. Auschwitz is a few miles away. Birkenau is where there were the gas chambers and the crematorium. And over there, I cannot explain because I still don't know why and how, but rather than taking us straight to the gas chambers, the two SS that were there, is because I did something out of the ordinary, and I don't know if now is the time or the place to explain. When we went off the cattle trains, and if you go to Poland, I was just there in the summer. I took the birthright to explain them what took place. The tracks are still there, and we went off the train, and in front of us were maybe about 20 wagons right in front of us, and we were standing doing nothing as we jumped off, and they asked me my name, label, what do we do now? Bear in mind, I was not quite 14, and I said to them, what I know, let's say Shema Yisrael, and they didn't buy it. So after 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I said, you know what? Why don't we line up 5 abreast? And I will be in front, and we're marching in step, singing Ani Ma'amin. There's a Hebrew song, Ani Ma'amin, very good for marching. Ani Ma'amin, you know. And they said to me, label, you know, I think you went off mind. You're crazy. They're going to kill us before we go to the gas chambers. I said, so what are you worried about? It'll be the best thing that ever happened to us.
within 5-10 minutes, as it was our time to march and to go toward the gas chambers, they said, well, you know what, let's do it. So well, line up 5 at West. Mind you, this is after 3.5 years in the ghetto, so we were used to marching, you know, and do all that stuff. And we marched in singing, and as we came to where the 2 SS people were there, and that they never heard. They went bonkers. They went over their mind. How 130 boys marching in, going to the gas chamber, singing. So they started, and I said, okay, halt, you know, it is with center attention. I speak a little bit Jewish, German, and they started to look for the papers. And now the papers were gone. And that was one of the miracles, right? But guess what? Very simple. By that time it was around 6 in the evening, and they changed the guards. So the SS that were there during the day left the box with the papers on the jeep, and they were so in was to go away that they took along with them. Now you have to understand, the Germans, the Marx moments of one, had papers for every transport, everybody. So they were looking, who are this? Who are these children that coming in singing, going to the gas chambers? And they couldn't find the papers because it was gone. That's what I call having angels on the soul. So they decided, thank God they decided that way, that maybe Dr. Mengele has something for us. Maybe they want to have some experiments or whatever it is. But maybe we are not supposed to go to the gas chambers. So they told us to get undressed and go to the showers, gave it the uniforms, and this way, instead of going to the gas chambers, we went to the camp. And that's how I survived the first time. In the book, I describe how I survived another 3 times. The time wouldn't allow us today. So I am a survivor, but I have questions. I have a lot of questions. There was a reporter was asked about Dr. Frank. Well, I don't like to give him any titles just because he wrote a book or whatever. I did not hear from Mark asking me the question or know from him and videos that he repents, that he's sorry what he did. That is unbelievable. An intelligent, educated man killing innocent people. Today, after 65 years, since 1945, shouldn't have the humanity to apologize and say, I'm sorry what I did. He didn't say anything. And we are not talking about that. Of course, it's remarkable what man did. But what happens now, from on on? And what are we doing about it? And who said that this cannot happen again? What can I tell you? There's a lot to discuss, a lot to do work. I am talking, and I in colleges, universities. I spoke in Yale University just before the summer to graduates for 2 hours on a Friday night. And if I would let them, I would be speaking to the end. So let me tell you why I speak. I do not charge for my talks. I go all over the world. I go to Europe. I went to Poland with a birthright. I went to the March of the Living 2 years ago. 10,000 youth. I spoke to them from 10 until 2 in the morning. I do not charge, and I'll tell you why not, and that will be, I'll conclude with that. I was from Birkenau, we went to Mauthausen, and from Mauthausen we went on the Toten March, on the Dead March, from Mauthausen to Gunskirchen, and we walked. and we walked. And I wasn't in such a great shape. Although I was not even, I was 14. And I needed something to drink, something liquid, and in the gutter was something liquid, and I had something, but apparently it wasn't pure water, maybe something else mixed with the water. And I got very, very ill in no time. So I wasn't, but I was still walking. In the gutter was a man, half in the gutter, half on the sidewalk. And he saw me walking, and it says, Ingale, Ingale, little boy, come ahead, come over here. So I thought that he wanted me to help him up, to go into Gisjurgen, because anybody that was left behind, they used to shoot. They didn't want to have any living. He said, no, madame, no. In other words, don't pick me up, I don't need it. And then he raised his head, and he became so strong, he says, Inga, little boy, you will survive the war. How he know, I don't know. Because I didn't know if I would or not by that time. You will survive the war. Tell the world what it did to us. Don't forget me. I continued walking. And then I turned around, and he was gone. And I believe that was the last will of testimony that this man told me. I don't know who the man is. I don't know his name. I don't know where he comes from. I don't know if he left any children or not. And this is why I talk. And this is why I can continue talking until I'm at the last breath in my life. I'll speak any place and tell them. And I pity anyone who come in front of me and tell me that this didn't happen. Thank you very much.
This is our legal counsel, Nitzana Darsh-Leitner from Israel, who's prosecuting a civil suit. You've made a few opening remarks. If anyone has questions, please, in regard to the lawsuit, please address them to Nitzana.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you for coming. Yesterday, we filed an historic lawsuit in the Federal District Court of Washington, D.C. The lawsuit is on behalf of 2 heirs of victims of the Holocaust that were murdered in Eastern Europe in 1941 and on because of one man who decided to send orders to kill Jews. This is the first time private citizens filing a lawsuit against a Nazi war criminal, a senior official of the SS, seeking compensations for the murders of their relatives. This is a civil action, not a criminal prosecution. Civil actions that were filed by private citizens because we see that governments are dragging their feet when it comes to criminal prosecution against Nazi war criminals. We see that Germany resists of extraditing Nazi war criminals to Holland. We see governments are looking at the elder age of the Nazi war criminals and hesitate whether to start proceeding against them. The new trend is today of private citizens, private lawyers, to bring these animals to justice. The Nazi war criminal, Dr. Bernhard Frank, is in charge by the lawsuit with genocide, crimes against humanity, kidnapping, and torture. Given the precedent cases of war crimes or cases against terror organizations, we know that the compensations in this lawsuit might come to $1 billion. We're talking about 27 people that were killed, which are the relatives of the 2 plaintiffs, and the lawsuit might come to this amount. Even when he dies, and we know that he's 97 years old, The lawsuit will continue after his estate. In the end, the plaintiffs will get compensations for the death of the relatives. This might turn to a class action suit. We'll invite all of the Holocaust, all the heirs of the Holocaust victims from Eastern Europe to join this lawsuit and to become plaintiffs in this case against Bernard Frank. We'll continue fighting neo-Nazis, Nazis war criminals in court. We will do it instead of government. We will do it instead of these institutions that's supposed to do this work. They're supposed to hunt down Nazis. What Mark Gould did was a heroic work of private citizens who did the work of government or institutions. And it shows that the war against those criminals are in our hands. 70 years after the order from 1941, the Jewish people will not forget. The Jewish people will not forgive. Thank you.
Are there any questions from any questions? Okay. Well, I think we can wrap it up. Thank you all for your attendance. Any of the cameras that want to remain, or print folks for one-on-ones with any of our guests, please feel free. Just let Mary Kay in the black in the back or myself know, and I'll be happy